Moving into the Public Service Committee meeting. The committee members are Mosley, Kamer, Holland, Lombardo, and McKittrick. Madam Chair, all members are present.
All right, thank you, Michelle. If I could get approval of our previous meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I have it. We have one piece coming before us this afternoon. It's an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts without the formality of advertising for bids to purchase refuse carts, recycling carts, and associated repair and replacement parts from the, Toter, Inc., and declaring an emergency. Mr. Lettle?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of committee. This is our, we don't do it every year, but we've done it 2 years ago now. This is to allow us to buy parts, wheels, lids, and total replacement, whether it's the sanitation trash cart or the recycling cart. This will allow us to buy about 2,000 new carts. They do come with a 10-year warranty. These carts our current system has been in since 2004, so it's been almost 20 years on these carts. But like I said, there's a certain amount that need replaced every year. We have about 45,000 accounts for sanitation, trash. So like I said, this will allow us to buy 2,000 new carts. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? I was about to call you Brad. I'm sorry. Councilman Lombardo.
Did you go ahead? Okay. This is more of a comment, I guess. For the refuse carts, has there ever been any thought, I know these men and women who drive the truck 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, whatever, it's dark. So has there been any thought about changing the recycle, which is a dark blue, to a different color versus the refuse carts that are a dark green? They look the same in the middle of the night. Any thought of that?
I can talk to sanitation. I don't know that we've had any of those conversations. Typically, we like, the sanitation cart to be on the left and then the recycle on the right. A lot of our residents don't know that. It is in our rules. I mean, if you look on line, so they know, but typically, we don't get a lot of crossover with our, some people may put them too close. It's an education piece that we like to let them know that if they could put them 3 or 4 feet away, that will help. So.
And I know, and that was going to be my comment too, that left and right. But and I know the refuse is bigger, a little bit bigger, but that was just a comment. If it works for them, it works for me. I would just think, I think in Talmadge there's a bright green, lime green versus a dark green for whatever company's out there. So
They don't seem to show the dirt or current ones. So,
True.
They all kind of look the same. So it's kind of nice.
True. And the other comment, for anybody listening out there, if your lid is broke, if your wheel is broke, all you need to do is call 311.
Yep.
And
we'll come out and take care of it.
That's right. That's right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilman Fusco?
This is a minor question, and really somewhat related, but not in terms of the toter for the recycling piece. I know a couple years ago we kind of had a media campaign or some kind of a campaign to educate folks, because at times they get them confused.
We still do the audit. We did hire some college students this year.
Good.
Through Keep Akron Beautiful, and we were out doing some audits, and we were trying to do more education on what should be in the cart and what should not be in the cart. Okay. So we did that back in June.
Have we moved the needle from before? Have we measured?
Oh, our contamination has dropped considerably. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That'd be interesting.
Not to where we'd want to be. We're still over 20%, but we'd preferably be just over 10. But yeah, it has dropped considerably.
Good. That's a good effort. Thank you.
Mr. Lombardo?
So on that note, is there any cards that come in the mail annually for the water bill for the education piece of it?
I believe they do. I'll find out when they're going to send those.
It's just, that's great, we're down to 20%, but, you know, strive for perfection, I guess, would be the hope, but anyhow, thank you.
Any other questions from committee members or council members? Seeing online. Mr. Little, what would be your pleasure?
Consent's fine.
Consent. Can I get a motion for consent?
So move.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. We have nothing else coming before us, so we are adjourned.
Our next committee meeting of the day is the Rules Committee. That begins at 2 o'clock, so now. Those committee members are Freeman, Fusco, Amobian, Connor, and Malik. Councilman Fusco will be chairing this committee as Councilman Freeman is absent. In just a few minutes, we'll begin. Thank you.
I'm ready whenever everyone's settled in. Gotta get Sharon. I'll go see if I can. Mike's not gonna be there.
Has the meeting started?
No, it hasn't, Councilwoman. Mr. Fusco stepped out, so I think we're going to start in a moment.
Thank you. I was wondering if my audio had gone down. Thank you.
Probably. Is this the last meeting of today? This the last meeting of today?
Okay, I believe we're ready to begin the Rules Committee of Akron City Council. Roll call, please.
Freeman. Fusco.
Aye.
Amobian.
Aye.
Connor. Aye. Malik.
Aye.
Very good. I'd like to entertain a motion, we accept the minutes of the previously held meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Very good, the ayes have it. We have, I'm going to recommend that we refer the item for a public hearing on October 3rd. The item that's on our regular agenda, I believe that's when we're going to have that public hearing.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, very good. So we'll refer that particular item. We do have one piece of new legislation that is before us, this Rules Committee resolution approving and confirming the appointment of Ellen Lander Nish as a member of the Akron Civil Rights Commission. I do know there's a lot of concern around this one, especially if the applicant, I guess, is qualified or not for this. I'm not sure, but there's been a lot of concern around that. Tamika Rose.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So, to see if Ms. Nish is qualified for this position, I think that I won't read her entire resume, but I will highlight one significant piece, or two significant pieces, that she received the highest score on the Ohio bar exam during her testing period, and she was ranked 1 out of 139 of her graduating law class and had a 3.98 GPA. So I think that over exceeds her qualifications, and I'm asking for emergency approval today for this.
All those council members who came forward with concerns, I'll make sure that they're aware of that. There's been quite a bit of that going on this afternoon, so I see Mr. Malik here has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Rose. This was a very pleasant surprise to see on the agenda when I pulled it up. Ms. Nish has obviously spent a substantial amount of time in city service, and as I recall firsthand, was very formative in not only the legislation that created this commission, but in the early days of meeting across the hall, developing the rules of the commission, helping support the commission from the administration role. And so I'm sure her talents will be highly valued and very helpful to the commission as it continues its work.
Very good. Is there other questions or comments? Would the applicant like to make any comments before the committee today? And I may be shy, I know that, but please feel free.
Thank you, Chairman Fusco, members of the committee. I'll just share that I was humbled to be asked to serve. As Councilman Malik said, this commission is very near and dear to my heart, and I am very excited to be able to give back to the Akron community in this new capacity, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for accepting this, too. We do appreciate it, with all kidding aside. Questions or comments from anyone whatsoever? Yes.
It's good to see you, Ellen. I'm glad to see you're back, even if just for this little part. I think it's you'll be a breath of fresh air to this commission, so it's good to see you.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Further questions or comments from anyone? Oh, Sharon Connor.
I just want to say welcome back. You were missed.
Very good. Any other questions or comments about this motion? Motion first.
Suspension of the rules with a favorable report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Very good. You're welcome back this evening at 7 o'clock if you would like. And you can also watch online, as you know. So very good. With
Thank
that,
you.
we're adjourned. Thank you all. Thanks.
Our next committee meeting of the day is the Public Safety Committee meeting. That will begin at 2:15. Those committee members are Kamer, Mosley, Lombardo, Malik, and McKittrick. It looks like all members are present. Give everyone just a moment to settle in, and we will begin when the chair is ready.
Yeah, I'd like to call the public safety meeting to order, please. All members are present. We did host a meeting last Monday, and I do need approval of those minutes, please.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thanks. We do not have no new legislation in front of us today, but I just wanted to take the time and give everybody the opportunity, just in case there's any questions or comments. And I do see we have a couple representatives, Chair. Just to briefly discuss the Citizen Oversight Board that was brought to us by Mayor Horgan last week. So if there's any committee members that have any questions or comments, right now is the time to bring those questions or comments forward. If not, I'll move on to any other council members that are in council chambers or online with us. All right, I do see Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Kamer. I know that we had extensive discussion about this last week, and so I don't necessarily want to prolong that, but I did see the day after, last Tuesday, there was a press release that was sent out from the administration that laid out a proposed timeline for the implementation of this ordinance. And so the timeline envisioned, I think, passage of the ordinance next Monday, and then opening the application process to residents next Tuesday, and then closing that process by the end of October. And I did share last Monday that one of my concerns was that moving forward with this very quickly does run the risk of creating a confusing process for residents. And the reality is that there is going to be a vote on a similar but conflicting proposal in early November. And so I do think that particularly whether we vote on this before November is one thing, whether there's actually a public process that would have to happen again a second time, most likely, if this passes, and then if the charter amendment passes, that would seem to me to be pretty concerning and unnecessarily duplicative and confusing to residents. So I did want to share that concern.
All right, thank you, Councilman. I appreciate those remarks. Any other committee members of public safety? All right, I do see Councilwoman Mosley.
Thank you, Councilman Kamer. I'm looking at the press release that went out on Tuesday. It must have just skipped me. I wish we would have waited till we passed it, if it's going to pass, before we send a timeline out, because it's almost like I just wish we would have waited, because it gives the notion that it's going to pass. And again, we fall back into this same concern that our residents have had time and time again. And it almost makes us as a council body look bad. Like, they think that the votes are already here and we don't have a say or an opinion in that, and that bothers me greatly. So I wish we would have waited until we at least took a vote on it. We all have an opinion about what we see could work and what could be problematic, and I just wish we would have had an opportunity to really hash those things out before a press release went out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I appreciate those comments. I do see Councilwoman Holland, her hands up. Please, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize, folks, but the sound quality is less than optimal today, so I'm not hearing all of the remarks in chambers, and I would ask that if you wouldn't mind, please get your mouth close to those microphones just for the benefit of those out here. And I have a question. I gather we've got some of the mayor's staff in the room, and again, I'm a little limited in what I can actually see here, and my apologies. I'm interested in getting a response, including from possibly members of the committee and colleagues on council, to a question that has come up a number of times. Procedurally, and I guess legally, folks are interested in understanding what happens when and if the mayor's ordinance is passed by this council, and then the voters have an opportunity to vote on the ballot initiative, and let's say that ballot initiative passes. Can someone in the room walk through, for the benefit of the citizens, as an attorney and a person who's looked at this, I have my take on this, but I'm interested in hearing what the staff to the sponsor has to say about this and what other members of council might have. Thank you.
Yeah, Councilwoman, I think I can attempt to answer the question, but as we talked about last week, I think that there's a certain unknown quality here, and what happens when the two are interacting, if they interact, I don't think anybody really knows. From a strictly legal perspective, I'd be happy to sit down and talk more thoroughly with you individually or any other council member if you'd like. But as I see it, to the extent that there were portions of the charter amendment that were passed and were not tied up in litigation, and were not directly in conflict with the ordinance, they would operate concurrently. So both would be in place to the extent that they're not directly conflicting, or certain provisions aren't stricken, or certain provisions aren't dragging one or the other into litigation. So again, there's so many unknowns. It's purely speculative for me to get up here and tell you how they would interact. I don't know. But I do see them as to the extent that they could coexist, that they would. And to the extent that they don't, then the charter provision would prevail.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Is there a universe in which there is, where the ballot initiative does not go through, but that this then carries forward a civilian oversight board, leading then, as I understand it, to a ballot initiative next November that would be substantially similar to the one that the petition has successfully put on the ballot for this November? Is this what's happening here?
Yeah.
Again, this is for the benefit of those who are watching.
Right, certainly. I'll defer to Ms. Collins on that point.
Thank you, Councilwoman Holland. Can you hear me?
I can.
Can you now?
Yeah.
You can. Okay, great. So that's exactly the purpose, is that we would, and we put it directly in the ordinance offered by Mayor Horrigan, that a ballot initiative in 2023 is something that we would propose, yes. Was that your question? Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Councilwoman, anything else? Councilwoman Holland?
I think that's it for now. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate you. I do see Councilwoman Linda Mobian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for asking those questions, Councilwoman Holland, because that is the confusion that I hear a lot from people. That's why it was so important for us to work together on this. And we've acknowledged that many of the aspects of the mayor's proposal mirror that of the 7,000 citizens who signed the petitions. And I'm glad to hear the attorney say that he believes, and I concur with him, that if the charter amendment passes, it should supersede the ordinance. That is my take, and I'm not an attorney, but it's almost like the federal law supersedes the state law supersedes local if they are ever in conflict. And we're talking about a charter amendment versus an ordinance. So that would be my take. Again, I'm no lawyer, but I believe that would be the case. And again, most of the aspects of the mayor's plan mirrors what we are proposing. I think the one aspect that's in question, that people seem to question, is the part about the union, about the investigative power that the board would have. That definitely, and then the number of members, I don't think that's much of an issue, 11 versus the 9 that we're proposing. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman, I appreciate you. Any other questions or comments in council chambers? I see Councilman Fusco's hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think at the end of the day, we're all pulling in the same direction. We would like to see something that we all can be proud of down the road. However, though, from what I understand from the research that's been collected out there, going slow and making sure that we legally stay in bounds is the most important piece of this, so that we don't have to redo it later on down the road. And whenever something is, whenever the bones, that the charter is kind of like the bones of something like this, and whenever that's got to be changed, it takes a lot of effort. And so I personally believe, and I understand the argument not to have perhaps an option out there, but me personally, I think it's important that Akron and Akron City Council and everybody understands that there's an ordinance out there, that there's another option, and it's not the charter option that's out there. That there's another option. Eventually, that it will go to the charter, but educating the voters in Akron in terms of, and just talk about, we've talked about it before, some of the flaws that are in the one that's going to the ballot. The flaws that are in there is flaws, let's just say it, in terms of not only the labor agreement that we have with the FOP, but also there's some suspicion about some problems with state and federal law as well, that cannot probably be overcome. And so I personally think that the timing is good. It kind of makes sense to let voters know that there is another option that's being discussed. It's going to be up to the voters to educate themselves. It's going to be up to us as those that are closest to it, educate those voters on this, and I personally think it's a positive. So, with that, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I do see Councilwoman Howland had her hand up, and then I'll go to Councilwoman Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that Councilman Fusco brings up some interesting and serious points that I think we would be spending our time well if, and I'm not sure how to do this, if this is something for our law department to weigh in on here, but I think it's important that we understand the competing issues here, and also the role of federal law and the role of a labor contract that was ratified by the mayor last, I believe it was end of February, beginning of March, could be helpful for citizens to understand exactly what it is that is of concern, if we're going to raise the existence of concerns. But I also think it's noteworthy that, as I understand it, and based on the comments today and previously, that it does not appear that these are rival or competing pieces, that both are designed to get us to the same place, which is a necessary and thoughtful retooling, something that is something whose time has come. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Mosley.
Thank you. So, Brian, I don't know if you or Emily can answer this, or at least find out the answer for us. We have a Citizens Review Board charter amendment that is going to be on the ballot in November. We have an ordinance that is looked to be passed next Monday. charter amendment passes in November per se. We have an ordinance and a charter. Charter supersedes the ordinance. We know that part. However, now we have the Citizens Oversight Board that will be going to the ballot that following November. This is a question I asked last week. Do we have two charter amendments, or does the new Citizens Oversight Charter trump the previous one? Or are we going to have both have different names? Does one trump the other, or do we have two running simultaneously with one another? So if you could,
Yeah.
that's important for us to know.
Sure. No, and now we're getting into law school exam questions. It's a complicated question, and one I haven't really deeply thought about. But I would assume, Councilwoman, that any subsequent charter provision that was passed would address that explicitly. So in other words, it would explicitly attempt to repeal the other, or it wouldn't. But if I were drafting it, I certainly would have a provision in there that would attempt would abrogate the previous one to the extent that they conflicted. But again, this is just me sitting here. I have not deeply thought about that or researched it or anything like that, so I can't sit with 100% clarity and tell you the answer. But a couple of things I want to put a point on. Councilwoman Amobian had brought up the statement that I made that a conflicting charter provision over an ordinance, those provisions, the charter would prevail. Generally speaking, legally, that is true. What that wouldn't address is the case where a piece of the charter provision or the charter provision itself was found to be unlawful. Right. So in this case, there may be questions about how that interacts with our existing collective bargaining agreement, to the extent that a charter amendment would purport to alter a collective bargaining agreement, an existing one, that collective bargaining agreement would prevail. So you could not override a collective bargaining agreement by way of a charter amendment, even if that were passed by the voters. So again, if those two are in conflict, I just want to be clear that only those lawful provisions of a charter amendment would prevail over an ordinance. So anyway.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
And Councilwoman, I'll just say in follow-up to that, you know, a lot of the questions that we're hearing here today have to do with timing. And the press release was certainly not intended to confuse. The press release was instead designed to ensure that there is some level of education around process. We understand, you know, conflicts of law is not easy. We don't really expect residents to understand conflicts of law. I don't even understand them after 18 years of legal practice all the time. But we do want to be true to our goal of seating a board quickly and having a learning period where we are able to make changes to the ordinance if need be. So I think that was the goal of talking about timing instead of confusion. And I think there is a genuine commitment to seeing the process through at this stage, and I'm really glad to see that, and I'm glad to hear of all of the interest from council as well. So I apologize if you thought that was the intent, but it certainly was not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I do see Councilman Russ Neal has joined us. He hasn't made a comment yet or a question, so I'll call on him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate all that's been shared. I'm just going to go back to a precedent that's set, because I hear everyone, and if we're asking questions out of sincere desire for clarity, can you imagine the public? And so a precedent had been set back when we did the primary issue. We could not get those that brought in the original legislation to move the primary couldn't get the supermajority to get it moved. So they went to the street to get the public's opinion, to get signatures to put it on the ballot. At the same time, there were those of us who felt that moving the primary created an inequitable disparity, because it meant that money had more influence in a early primary, where, you know, when people have the chance to walk, the sweat equity can balance out the money. That being said, when the signatures were collected, the effort to even hear from those who wanted to bring in opposing legislation from council was stalled, and it was because the people had spoken, the signatures had been collected. I'd like for us to, you know, take that same approach here. I mean, here the signatures have been collected. To spend this time to educate, be whatever side you stand on, educate constituents on the pros and cons, on what's before us right now, to keep it clean. And then let's do what we say we do. We say that we believe in collaboration, transparency, inclusiveness. Use this time between those on two sides of the fence to start looking at, okay, if this passes, these are our concerns for those who are on one side of the aisle. And if it doesn't pass, then we have the ordinance, and those who use this time to bring this and put it on the ballot can say, well, these are our concerns. And the big concern is, hey folks, lack of trust. Point blank lack of trust. We could use this time to build that trust. We have to quit kicking this can down the road. The lack of trust that folks have for us in government is obvious, is evident. But we could use this time to say, okay, we're going to honor those who collected the signatures. As a part of our democratic process, we're going to honor that. We're going to use the time in between educating whatever side you're on. However that vote comes, we'll deal with it afterwards. Because I agree that in some cases an ordinance is better because you can work out the bugs. But the reality of it is we've got legislation that is passed, and it's just sitting. Nothing's been moved. So my request on behalf of this body is that we honor those who brought this. We've had a precedent of this before when signatures have been collected. Use this time for us to work and discuss collectively, because there hasn't really been any discussion between council and administration on this in any real degree, and also with those out there in the community that took the effort to collect the signatures. That way there'll be no confusion. There's just one issue on the ballot. People will just speak to the pros and cons. People will be clean. Because if it passes or if it doesn't pass, either way, we know we still got work to do. But we would have spent this time building the trust that is necessary to move forward. That is my request, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Councilwoman Mobian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My comment is only that when this passes, then the devil is in the detail, because we will then craft the language around the ordinance, because, you know, a committee will be formed and all of that. So those issues, I understand what the staff person is saying, that those issues that are not in conflict will be implemented, and those that have some concerns around labor issues. But I think we can work around that. I really do. And I think the important thing is that we get the amendment passed and then start working out the details of what this will look like. Again, I still believe that we are all facing the same issue, that we're trying to bring something forward that the citizens can accept and trust and believe in. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. Anything else in council chambers? I don't see any. Oh, I see Councilman Fusco.
Thank you, Chairman Kamer. Just that, you know, we've heard and we understand totally, we are in year one of a 3-year agreement. We also understand that it's flawed in terms of the labor agreement, which is going to supersede what is passed via charter, assuming it would pass. And you know, me personally, I like to keep it honest. I heard keep it clean, but I like to keep it honest too, so that everybody understands, the voters especially, that this is going to be tough to enforce this whenever there is a flaw like this. It cannot be enforced. And I think that message needs to get out too. I respect, and I've been on that team out getting signatures. I've been on that team who, and it's a lot of work, and I get that, and appreciate all of the work that was done by those that circulated these petitions. But I believe, again, that the slow walk here in terms of passing an ordinance first and then kind of refining, learning, living with that for about a year or so would be prudent, and then we go in with a charter that we can, that's enforceable, that's usable, that we can deal with. I think is much better. Changing the charters harder, and that's just the bottom line to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Malik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate all the comments that have been made today. I just want to note that I want to kind of address the assumption that there is a conflict between the proposed charter amendment and the collective bargaining agreement. There is an argument that it may violate it. The charter amendment actually does not seek to violate the collective bargaining agreement. It actually directly seeks to do the opposite, right? It directly says that any provision of it should be construed so as not to conflict with the collective bargaining agreement. Now, again, the union or anyone else can make an argument that it will do so, but the union can make lots of arguments to the effect of the union made an argument when the decision was made to have officer-involved shootings, including the Jalen Walker shooting, go to BCI, that violated the collective bargaining agreement, and that is currently going to be going to go through the labor process, right? And that's going to be decided upon. And so the reality is that did not stop us from having an independent investigation through BCI, right? Despite the fact that they actually made a direct claim that is currently going through the dispute process. And so I agree that we should be open and honest, and I acknowledge that argument can be made about the charter amendment, but I do want to push back about the idea that it is conclusively flawed or it is conclusively in violation of the collective bargaining agreement.
Councilman Malik, I think it's correct that no one has concluded in a court of law that something is in conflict. Instead, I think our concern is that the provision in the initiative petition for a charter amendment includes language that relates to an investigatory process that is outside of the investigatory process in the collective bargaining agreement that would be done in duplicate, not by an entity that is such as the state government or federal government. And there's a provision stating that the charter amendment shouldn't be construed so as to conflict with the collective bargaining agreement. And our concern is that to not to conflict. I apologize if I misstated that. But the result of that is that we're telling the public there's an investigatory process that we think is not possible. And I think that's misleading. So that's our concern.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. I just want to address that. The folks who are proponents of the charter amendment are seeking to be very clear in explicating what the proposal can do and what it cannot do. And I think every time I've spoken about it, I've been clear that there will be no duplication of the disciplinary investigative process as such, nor do I read the charter amendment to do the same.
That may be the intent, but that's not what we see it saying in plain language. And that's our concern.
Thank you. Councilwoman Howland.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for these immediately preceding comments. I feel like we're getting somewhere. Something that's been conspicuously missing in most conversations and media coverage on all of this has been what are we looking at and what are we talking about when we talk about a possible conflict with a collective bargaining agreement? And I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but it sounds as though what we've circled here is that there is within the petitioner's charter amendment language that would give the Citizens Oversight Board the ability to direct investigations, which logically would lead to potentially discipline, versus the other way of going, if you will, which calls for referral for investigation. And I just want to make sure that I'm getting this right. Again, as an attorney, and my background is decades as a civil rights attorney, very much centering on labor and employment law, my take on this is that there is one big difference between the mayor's ordinance and the proposed ballot initiative. And that comes down to this ability to direct versus refer. And I want to make sure I'm getting this accurately. So I would love to hear from Councilman Malik and Ms. Collins.
I guess, I think Ms. Collins actually did a very good job of addressing this, but I think, and I'd be happy to speak with you about this in more detail, Ms. Holland, when the two provisions need to be read together. So I think any language about investigations has to be read so as not to conflict with the collective bargaining agreement. And so if having a separate disciplinary process, which again, no one is saying that this seeks to do, if that would conflict with the collective bargaining agreement, which it seems like it would, then this charter amendment could not do that. Now, investigation is a very broad word. Investigation could mean investigate the policies and practices around traffic stops, right? And it's not clear that I don't believe that would violate the collective bargaining agreement. Someone could assert that it does. I don't believe it does. But I think what it's meaning is that the language in the charter amendment needs to be read so as not to conflict with the collective bargaining agreement. It cannot do things that the current collective bargaining agreement does not permit us to do. So I hope that clarifies that.
Well, I guess that's not really my concern or the concern of many residents who've asked questions about this. I think we can all agree that this board formed by either means would have the ability to consider and deliberate over things like traffic stop policy in sort of the abstract, largest way. Rather, my concern is that we all of us, as Akron citizens and voters, have a shared understanding of what the Citizens Oversight Board it purports to be able to do under the petition language versus the ordinance. That's it. So appreciate your response. I think I'm trying to thread a slightly different needle, but thanks.
Thank you.
Councilman, I don't know if Ms. Holland, Councilwoman Holland wants me to respond to that. She had called on me before. I'm happy to, if you'd prefer I do. Councilwoman Holland, did you want me?
I didn't hear what you said, though.
I apologize. Still getting used to the mic. Councilwoman Holland, did you want me to respond? You had asked for me to do that.
I would. Again, my questions this afternoon are really designed, to help others understand what all of this means. So I would dearly love for you to respond. Thank you, Ms. Collins.
Absolutely. Councilwoman, I think you're pinpointing the issue, this idea of referral of an investigation versus investigate, which is also complicated in the initiative petition for a charter amendment by language that includes subpoena power. So the idea of investigating on your own accord, so a board that investigates of its own accord and has subpoena power, both of those things lend themselves to investigations that we believe would be outside of the collective bargaining agreement process, duplicative of the collective bargaining agreement process. And that is a problem. So referring citizen complaints for investigation is a different process, one that an auditor or a board that has review power can easily do. And we think that that is well within the ability of a citizen oversight board. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. President Somerville?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say this again, and I've said this many times, that again, I feel very strongly that the Citizens Review Board should be a charter amendment. And I've said this, I have some real serious concerns with the charter amendment that is currently going to be on the ballot come this November. I have some real concerns that Akron City Council will be handcuffed, right? And we will not be able to draft the ordinance as residents are under the impression that we will be able to do because of possible conflicts and possible litigation. So I have some real concerns there. And I think the one thing that we have to remain focused on is, what is the end goal, right? The end goal is to make sure at the end of the day, we have a Citizens Review Board in place, right? We might not be there come this November, right? But there's a possibility for us, of course, to be there next November. Again, I really wish we would have had more time to really better shape the charter amendment that's going to be on the ballot this November so that we can address some of those concerns and some of those flaws. But here we are. So I think we have an opportunity to get it right. I'm just not so sure we're going to be able to get it right this November. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, President Somerville. Councilwoman Omobian, you see your hand up again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we have had a good discussion about some of the areas of concern. I think that we are overly emphasizing those concerns. I think the 7,000 signatures that were gathered was evidence enough to me that the citizens want to have something outside of a political arena as much as possible. And I realize once this is passed that they will probably have more appreciation for what we are proposing than what is on the table from the administration. So for all the concerns that are expressed, and I hope they're not intentionally trying to confuse people, for all the concerns that are expressed, is the one area that we keep talking about, the investigative power that this body would have or not have. At the end of the day, I believe that can be worked out. The other parts of this charter amendment, I don't hear confusion or concerns about. We are talking about something that the citizens are asking for, and they're asking us to allow them to be empowered to help with this problem that's been going on for many, many years. I don't even believe that we would have had a proposal from the administration if the citizens hadn't gone out and gotten these signatures to put this on the ballot. So I believe that the discussion is good, but I just believe some of this language is to confuse people. But the bottom line is we are pushing for a citizens oversight committee to be put in place where citizens can look at what's going on, ask questions, make recommendations, and for the situation to be totally transparent as opposed to what we've been dealing with for years. So I appreciate the discussion, Mr. Chair. I truly believe that the proposed amendment is the way to go, even with the issues that are being discussed we can work through those. But I think the people will believe more in the amendment than they do the ordinance that's on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Anything else in council chambers? Michelle, do you see anybody?
Yes, Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Chairman Kamer. I want to address the idea that the administration proposed an ordinance off of the initiative petition process. That's simply not true. And I want to make it clear that we began these conversations starting with Chief Milet in April. So in trying to garner support for the right model, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to do that, and we began those conversations in earnest in April. I know that my colleague wants to add to that.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So I guess I just want to also be clear that our goal here today is to sit before you as a body and to present something to you. It's not to poke holes in the initiative petition. Was not drafted by the administration and is not being put forth. But what we do have in front of you is a carefully researched, thoughtfully drafted framework that enacts all of the recommendations of the Racial Equity and Social Justice Task Force. It synthesizes them with the best practices from around the country. By the way, the task force did not recommend an investigatory portion of that. And basically, we're here to tell you it's at least legally sound, it is expeditious, and most importantly, we believe it provides a framework that is flexible and allows the community to get the board up and running and to make tweaks as needed, as opposed to enacting it into what's tantamount to our city constitution, which is much more difficult, as we all know, to change. So again, I just want to be clear too that as we sit here, our goal is not to point fingers and poke holes at the initiative petition that was signed by 3,300 folks. What we're here to do is to talk about this ordinance that we have controlled and that we have prepared. So in any event, again, would open it up to any conversations you guys would like to have, further discussions about this ordinance.
Thank you, Brian. Emily, I appreciate it. We'll be discussing this next week. Councilman, do you have another question? Malik?
Yeah, going off of what Mr. Angeloni said, I just kind of want to, reaffirm my belief that we are all trying to get to the same place. We may not agree along the way there, but I hope that my tone and my approach, I'm just trying to convey how I feel in a respectful way. And I appreciate the work that has been done, even when I disagree with some of the elements of it or the process by which it is going to unfold.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate that. All right, let me see. Brian, Emily, I want to thank you for coming down to council chambers. Everybody, we will continue this discussion next week at Public Safety. And with that, if nothing else come before us, we're adjourned for Public Safety. Thank you.
That is the final committee meeting of the day. Council will meet tonight at 7 p.m. Thank you.